Running on Air by 11ty7. Chapter 6, Part 1. Harry leaves early the next morning before Ginny wakes. He has an 8:30 a.m. meeting with the family solicitor who, he discovers, is a tall, broad-shouldered witch who reminds him somehow of Madame Maxime. She ushers Harry into her office, a small room clearly designed by a fan of minimalism. Been expecting something extravagant for a solicitor, worthy of the Malfoys, but there's little more than a set of filing cabinets, a glass table, and 2 chairs. The solicitor, Miss Zeisel, she introduces herself crisply, takes a seat behind the table and gives Harry a look over her silver spectacles. It's a look worthy of McGonagall, and Harry has the absurd feeling that he's about to be told off for something. "So," she says, "you want to know about the Malfoys?"
"Draco, specifically. I'm undertaking his case."
Harry hands over his badge. Zeisel scrutinizes it closely before handing it back. "If you want to know about his financial affairs, you'll have to contact the family financial advisor," she says.
"No, actually. Draco had an appointment with you the day he disappeared. September 9th, 2003 at 4:30 p.m.
Harry speaks without preamble. Zeisel doesn't strike him as the sort of person to indulge in light chit-chat. "Yes, I recall that."
"You do?"
Harry says with surprise. Zeisel gives him another look over his spectacles. "I have quite the memory, Mr. Potter."
"Can you give me any details about the meeting?"
Zeisel gives his badge another considered look, and for a moment he thinks she's about to say something sharp about client confidentiality. "Draco Malfoy contacted me a week earlier stating that he required legal counsel."
"Draco was in trouble,"
Harry says with alarm. "Nothing urgent, apparently. I asked if it was an emergency, and Mr. Malfoy assured me that he simply required some legal advice. He took no issue with waiting a week for an appointment."
"Did you have any idea what he wanted to discuss with you?"
Zeisel frowns and tilts her head slightly. "He required information about hindering prosecution."
"And what does that mean?"
"Generally preventing a criminal from being prosecuted. This may include concealing a criminal sought by law enforcement, providing them with the means of avoiding discovery or apprehension, usually giving money or arranging transport, and so on." Harry stares at Zeisel for a long moment, his thoughts whirling.
Draco knew where his father was, or was possibly even helping him.
"I am unable to comment on that matter. All I can say is that Mr. Malfoy requested legal counsel regarding hindering prosecution and agreed to an appointment. The appointment was not kept, and I have had no further communication with Mr. Malfoy." Zeisel neatly smoothes a crease in the sleeve of her robe and stands up. "I'm afraid I have an appointment with a client now, Mr. Potter, but if you require any additional information, please contact my secretary for an appointment."
"You must have known he was talking about Lucius Malfoy,"
Harry says, remaining seated. "As I said, I'm unable to."
"Draco went missing the same day he was supposed to meet you and talk about Lucius, and you never told someone. You never said anything."
Zeisel's face closes up. All the muscles tighten, and her mouth turns into a narrow, unforgiving line. "The Malfoy family has plenty of holiday houses overseas. I suggest, Mr. Potter, that if you want to find Mr. Malfoy, you start there, rather than throwing around baseless accusations," she says coldly.
"You're just like the rest of them,"
Harry says, his voice low and angry.
"Think Draco's gone off to live in some luxury villa somewhere, don't you? You don't know a damn thing about him."
"I must ask you to leave." Zeisel snaps, and Harry stands up.
"Gladly,"
he says, striding to the door.
"Thank you for all your help."
He leaves, slamming the door behind him, and knowing it's childish, but he can't stop himself.
He's so angry. Draco has been missing 3 years. 3 years! And everyone involved in the case, besides Astoria and Narcissa, has treated Draco's disappearance like it's a joke. The first case officer's notes are laughable. But running beneath the torrent of anger at Zazel is the anger at himself. After all, he'd thought the same when the investigation first started. And even further back, when he first heard Draco had disappeared. He had been 23 then, and his whole life seemed lit up like summer sky. Friends and drinks at the pub and Ginny, beautiful, bright Ginny. They'd only just bought the apartment, and there was so much energy in them. And Draco's disappearance had been nothing but a footnote in his life. A brief read of a newspaper headline. A small snort of content as he imagined Draco gloating in an expensive retreat somewhere. Then he had effortlessly moved on, never sparing the incident another thought until the file landed on his desk 3 years later. 3 long years. And maybe somehow he's still not doing enough. He found the notebook a month ago for Merlin's sake, but he'd only just spoken to the solicitor. What sort of investigator was he? He was rubbish. Harry tastes blood and realizes he's biting his lips. He unclenches his jaw and disapparates to the ministry atrium. Arthur Weasley is delighted to see him. "Come in, have a seat, he says, ushering Harry into his office. Mr. Weasley has come a long way since his poky little office so many years ago. As the newly appointed head of the Muggle Liaison office, his new office is very roomy and well appointed. "What can I do for you, Harry?" he asks, offering a tin of toffees. Harry accepts one and sits down in a chair opposite Mr. Weasley's desk. "I'm doing a few cold cases at the moment," Harry says, unwrapping the toffee. "One of which is Draco Malfoy's." He pauses then, in order to study Mr. Weasley's expression. He frowns, but doesn't appear too surprised or unhappy. "I was wondering," Harry presses on after a moment of silence, "if I could access the Muggle database for unidentified people." "Oh dear," Mr. Weasley says slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that, Harry. Not much hope for him, then, I suppose. We have a liaison officer for the matter, so—" "I was thinking somewhere more regional," Harry interrupts. "The Devon and Cornwall Constabulary." "Ah," Arthur nods. "I can talk to our law enforcement cooperation team, and they'll arrange it all. A few police uniforms and a befuddlement charm or two, and you'll have your files." "Thanks," Harry says gratefully, just as there's a polite knock, and the secretary pokes his head around the door. "A report from the Muggle Prime Minister, sir." "Ah, yes," Mr. Weasley says. "He'll be wanting an update about the Welsh Dragon incident." He stands up and looks apologetically to Harry. "Sorry to dash off. Say hello to Ginny for me, won't ye? Molly misses her something dreadful." "All right. Thanks again," Harry says, standing up and leaving the office. It will be a long and impatient wait for the files, but he has other cases to attend, he reminds himself. He returns to his office very slowly. That night he dreams of Cornwall again. The cliff, the dark waves eddying endlessly around the dark rocks below. Draco isn't there. Harry waits. The wind nips at his face, a saw-tinted bite from the freezing Celtic Sea. He shivers and draws his cloak closer, fighting with the material as it slips from his numb hands. This is Draco's memory. How can it exist while Draco isn't here? It doesn't make sense. Harry steps closer to the edge of the cliff, moving slowly until he can look straight down into the wind-tossed waves and watch the water smash against the craggy rocks. "Draco," he says, but the word is whipped away by the wind and disappears soundlessly into the dark depths of the sea. tries again, raising his voice to call out, "Draco!" This time, the word lifts and carries clear across the night sky, echoing twice. "Draco! Draco!" But there is no answer. The first day of December, London is still shrouded in morning fog when Harry arrives at the ministry and goes to his office, unlocking the door and removing his mittens and scarf. Just as he sits down at the desk, a fire comes flapping wildly into his office and nearly strikes him over the head. Harry frowns at it. Any files sent the previous day, after Harry already had left, tend to hang about in the hallways until he arrives in the morning. His faint irritation vanishes, however, when he sees the note scribbled on the cover of the file. "Copies taken from Cornwall Devon Police Database of unidentified persons." The file is quite slim, and Harry would guess there's only 15 cases or so. He dismisses the first 12 cases. The bodies were all found prior to 2003. The 13th case consists of nothing more than a partial jawbone found in woodland in Devon, and Harry dismisses that one. The 14th sets the age at 50 to 70. The 15th lists the sex as male, the age 18 to 25. Hair and eye color unknown. Found on the 21st of January 2004. Washed up near Rosenathan Point, Cornwall. Body believed to have been in the water 4 to 6 months, the note observes. Harry stares at the page for a long time. Then he slowly turns to the piece of parchment adherent to his desk with a sticking charm and writes on it. "Consultation required. Potter." The words dissolve. It's a full 5 minutes later when a reply appears. "Be there in an hour. Butterworth." It's a very long hour. Harry tries to work, but he can't. The words seem to trickle away like rain. He can't focus. He reads the 15th page of the file over and over. Washed up near Rosenathan's Point, Cornwall. Harry pauses, then presses a quill to the parchment again. "Bring map." Butterworth doesn't reply to that one, but he arrives 20 minutes later with a tattered book under one arm. A comprehensive guide to the geography of Great Britain. "What did you find?" Butterworth says, handing Harry the book. "I don't know." Harry pushes the file, open at page 15, towards Butterworth. For a moment the officer's silence as Butterworth reads the page, and Harry quickly finds a map of Cornwall, drawing his finger along the latitudes and longitudes until he's found it. Rosenathan Point, 15 miles northeast of Helston. "Tell me the detail of your case," Butterworth says, reading the page. They've done this 1,000 times before, but this time Harry can't think of what to say for a long moment. He retrieves Draco's files and opens it, fumbling with the pages. "Male, age 23 at time of disappearance. Went missing September 2003. After a long moment he adds quietly, "Known to frequent the Cornish coast." "A high chance it's a match, then." Harry nods mutely. "You don't look very well," Butterworth says. "I hope you haven't come to work with a cold," he adds disapprovingly. There have been a number of highly contagious colds going around in the ministry. "No, I'm fine," Harry says, clenching his trembling hands around the atlas. "Well?" Butterworth says after a moment. "Magical signature available?" From our side?" Harry says, finding his voice thanks to Butterworth's reassuringly disinterested expression. "The file you've got now, that's a Muggle one." Butterworth frowns. "I'll need to access the remains." He pauses. "Cremated or buried by now, most likely. We'll have to do the Muggle way. Go and arrange the Muggle liaison office to fetch the DNA sample." He waves a hand irritably. Contact me when you have it.
Harry nods and Butterworth leaves, taking his atlas with him. Harry stands up and goes once more to Mr. Weasley's office. Harry flees to Matthew and Astoria's house late in the afternoon. He has a driving lesson, although it couldn't be farther from his mind. Mr. Weasley had spoken to the Magical Law Enforcement Department and explained they would be able to send along their Muggle liaison officer to sufficiently negotiate with the Muggle police officer and gain access to the DNA sample. The sample would then be sent to Butterworth, who could analyze it for a match in magical signature.
Your indicator's still on.
Matthew sounds amused.
Something on your mind? Been out of it all afternoon.
Harry turns a corner and says nothing, wondering whether or not he should tell Matthew or Astoria. No, it would be unprofessional. He shouldn't say anything until he's gotten the results back, which could take anything from a week to a fortnight.
Just thinking about one of my cases,
he mutters at last, and Matthew doesn't press any farther. Harry slows down to turn into the driveway, listening to the tires crunch over wet gravel. After he parks the car, they go inside and sit in front of the roaring fire. Matthew asks a few questions about Billywigs, but he seems to pick up on Harry's mood and draws the conversation to a close. Harry knows distantly that he's being a bad guest, darkly contemplative and distant, but he can't bring himself to feign a smile and easy chatter. Draco could be dead. Drowned 3 years ago, before Harry even saw the first memory, before he even wrote like circles in the file, before he even read the words, "Do you remember when we were 11? Harry says his farewells to Astoria and Matthew, fleeing to the apartment. Ginny has put a small Christmas tree, no bigger than an owl, on the end of the kitchen counter. Harry stares at it for a moment, remembering the lush pine needles buried beneath the snowdrifts of Godric Hollows. The cheerful pub decorated with lights, and the distant sound of carols being sung. He could have grown up there, built snowmen as a child. When he was older, he could have had his first drink in that pub.
Let's go back to that.
What would Ginny say if she sold the apartment and bought a country home? Harry exhales sharply and goes to the sliding door, opening it and stepping out onto the balcony. It's cold tonight. Dewdrops bead along the balcony railing, and Harry's breath hangs in the air like cloud. Far below in the street, someone's whistling again. Blow the wind southerly, southerly, southerly. A faint pop, and the front door opens.
Harry, you'll never guess who we're playing Saturday. Only 2 matches left of the season, and... What are you doing out there? Close the door, it's freezing.
Ginny takes off her woolen hat and scarf.
We're playing the Swindon Skylarks, and they're Seeker's Wanda's brother, so of course it's going to be very interesting. Nothing like a bit of sibling rivalry to liven things up.
She glances up at him, her cheeks flushed with cold, looking beautiful as ever.
Hurry up and come inside.
Harry pauses a moment, listening to the whistling in the streets below, then steps inside and snaps the door shut. To be continued.